Welcome back to House Guest with me, Hailey. I'm the psychic medium, and this is the podcast that connects you to the other side. We are switching things up here on House Guest. I am about to have like a really great talk with Dr. Lauren Hodge. You can go back to episode 40 and listen to my reading with her. And she had a couple of updates that I've been trying really hard to get into, like the end of a podcast episode. But I think it's better that you guys get to hear it from her. And she has even more since the last time I checked in with her. So I hope that you guys enjoy this conversation. Also, please remember to like, subscribe, review the podcast. It really helps other people find this. I think one of my goals for House Guest is just to connect in with as many people as possible. I know that not everybody is able to book with me or able to get a reading with me, but at least this way it gives them an idea of how to connect in for themselves. So please do that if you feel so inclined. Also, you can book with me at my website, HaileyLowFennel.com, and I cannot wait to connect in with you. And lastly, there's one event coming up on February 22nd, I believe. It's a think tank. So it is for women who want to connect into their higher selves. There'll be an astrology reading, a group reading with me, and then there's also going to be a group of women there. It's only for up to about 8 people that are going to help you problem solve things in your career. So it's for those looking to heighten their career. Even if you're just at the beginning stages, it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a lot of workshops and brainstorming. And please reach out to me if you want more information on that. There is also an event with Candlefish again, so a group reading with Candlefish. And that's downtown Charleston, South Carolina. And then candle making afterwards. We just did one over winter solstice. It was one of the best times I've ever had, and I really, really can't wait to do it again. So we're going to do it over spring equinox. I think it's on March 20th. I should have looked at my calendar before doing this, but go to my website, go to events, you'll see it there. I cannot wait to connect in with you guys. If you have any questions, just please feel free to reach out. And I hope that you enjoy this conversation with Dr. Lauren Hodge. We're doing a special episode right now. I'm kind of looking to change the podcast up a little bit. You'll still hear mini readings and readings here and there, but I'm really excited to connect with one of our guests from way back when we first started the podcast, Dr. Lauren Hodge. So you'll have to go back and listen to her episode. But welcome, and will you tell us a little bit about what you do and how people can find you, and then we'll just kind of go from there.
Yes, and thank you for having me back on.
Thank you.
We're really excited to catch up and let you know what's happened over the last year since our session. I am a workplace well-being and parenting coach and consultant, and I support business leaders to build teams that are able to thrive by enhancing their environment and their communication. And I also guide parents to build stronger connections with their children. And usually that's parents who are having child kind of emotional or behavioral concerns.
Yeah, amazing. I love that. So a few different things have changed in the last year. And you were one of the people, like occasionally, even in private sessions, I'll have people that email me or reach out to me and are like, I just have to tell you X, Y, and Z, like a little update. And we've asked for them on the podcast before, and I have not found a way to like totally integrate the updates that people send me. Like it always kind of seems like I'm just still kind of getting used to this podcasting format and like when and how to put those things in. And so this is one of the ways that we're going to try and do it. And I know that our listeners are going to be really excited to hear what you have to say. But is there anything that you want to talk about first? It can be anything and everything that you felt like would be considered an update from the last time that you had the reading, and specifically kind of like related to the reading.
Yes, I'd love to go. So I listened back to the podcast episode recently, and I was able to pick up on like some really incredible things that have happened over this last year that you were channeling and talking about. So I'd love to jump into that if that's okay.
Oh, heck yeah. We would love to hear it.
All right. So last year you were saying, and I know you don't like always remember like the session.
Yeah.
So Last year, you were saying that there were 7 things that were going to come through, and they would be kind of like quite quickly all together, like maybe 3 of them, and then 4 like right soon after that. And so, about it was about 7 months after the interview in August and September, like 7 things just like bam, like all of these goals I had for the year happened in like this one span
See,
of
I'd
time.
be like, what? To what?
Yeah.
I
So,
said what? And
okay.
tell
So,
me
what were
everything.
they? So, um, I know. So, the first, like, the big ones were that I completed my psychedelic practitioner certification, which was something I was working towards, but that finished in August. That was the first thing.
Oh,
And I almost
congratulations.
think it's like once you're in alignment and you're doing the things that you want to do, that's when all that happens. So, I was able to freeze my eggs, which is something that's been like on my to do list and like want list for a couple years now. Um, One really unexpected thing was I moved into where I'm living now, into the house I'm living in now, and it's surrounded by green space. And you brought this
Yeah.
up on the podcast, like how important that is for me. So I love it. Like it's just brought this whole like calming kind of energy to my life now. And I was downtown before, in a beautiful place, but it was just quite loud. So it's nice to have that. And then I transferred to an in-person clinical master's program. So I was
Oh,
doing a
cool.
master's online, and I'm now doing it at the Citadel, and it's literally changed everything to be in person and be able to, I coach online, I do so much online, so to have that in-person interaction has been incredible. And there are other little things too. The other 3 were not as big as, oh, I went to Greece and got to see a lot of my friends from overseas. Like we all met up in Greece for a friend's 40th, and I think that experience was incredible. And I'm not sure what the other ones were, but those were the ones that kind of stood out because of like how symbolic they are for what I'm wanting to create and do.
Ooh, that is so cool. And you're right. Like so I don't remember my readings. Like it's a little bit of a combination of things. And if anyone else is like working to be a psychic medium or currently is a psychic medium, they might say something similar. I actually like didn't believe someone when they told me this at first. They're like, you won't remember your readings. Because I feel like I remembered verbatim like my first 5 readings, maybe. And I was like, no, no, no. Like I'll just always remember it. But you don't. Like at some point, it's a mix of things. It's like you've given so many readings that it just kind of goes out of your head. And it's also like a different part of your brain is taking over that it's not totally connected to the memory part. Though I will say occasionally I have guides that come in. Um, and they'll remind me of a really significant reading because they want to talk about something similar with someone that I'm sitting with, even if they don't know them. So then, like, I'll
Oh.
start to remember a reading between 2 different people, and I'm meant to pay attention to it. So if that's happening to you out there, you're like meant to pay attention to it. And I'm going to say this just popped into my head, so I'm going to say it. Even if you're not a psychic medium and you're asking for clarity on something, and for whatever reason you start thinking about this other person in this other that's currently going through a different phase of life and maybe like how they handled it or what they went through or how they connected in to get the things that they wanted in life. Sometimes that's your guides coming in and being like, here's an example. Here's like a little bit of a path to go down. And then you're meant to like interpret it into your own being. Does that make sense in any way?
Yeah, that does make sense. So it's like something else can come up from someone else or for someone else, but then it can be interpreted for you.
Yeah, they're always so like our soul, our guides, our loved ones on the other side are always working with what we know to give us messages. So they're not going to not at all times. In fact, 99% of the time, they're going to talk to us with the references that we already know because it's easier for them and it's easier for us. Every once in a while, you
Mm.
might get something totally out of the blue, like occasionally like an audible word outside of yourself or a dream that feels completely and totally unique. But when we're looking for connection on the everyday, which
Mhm.
is completely possible, we're going to get things that are completely kind of like nuanced and referenced, like within ourselves that we almost miss it because it's so like, oh, that just popped in my head, or like I know about that thing. How is that an answer for me? And they're like, well, it's for you to interpret. So if you work with that idea, you'll get to a really sweet spot where you're able to at least take action. It might not be the most clear thing, but we get clarity through action. So then when we get that action, we get even more clarity, we get the next action, and then so on and so forth. But I do, for it, so to kind of come back around, it's like, yeah, like I forget my readings. But I think that's really cool for you that like one thing kind of like led to the next, to the next, to the next. I do have like a kind of a random question for you. Is Greece something that you picked out, a place that you really wanted to go?
It was picked, that was chosen by my friend whose 40th it was. But it was
Okay.
on my vision board because she planned it like a year, like started planning it a year beforehand. And I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to go. So I put it on the vision board.
Ooh.
And I really have always wanted to go to Greece. And it was my first trip, this is crazy, overseas in 5 years. And I used to travel like every 2 months somewhere different. So it was symbolic in that way. But yeah, she chose the location.
Oh, I like that. Only say that because I know that sometimes there's these places that. Have you ever been to Greece before, or was that your first time?
It's my first time.
Okay, cool. There's these places that we're called to go to. People have heard me say this one before, and it's so silly. I don't know if that's the right word, but it feels silly when I say it in my mind for some reason because I really want to go to Australia, and it's not like impossible. Like there's at this point in my life, it's a little bit of like timing with kids and all that sort of thing. But it's one place that I've always wanted to go. And I don't have, like, if someone were like, why Australia? I don't really have a reason. It's like a soul calling. Like, it's a place that I feel like when I get there, it's going to oddly feel like home. And not that I'm meant to move there because it's probably really hard. From what I understand, it's really hard to get citizenship there, but let me in. But I know it's really hard to like, it's the point isn't to like actually live there, move there, but I just know that when I get there, I think it's going to feel like home. And I think it's likely because I've had a really great past life there, or a past life that really resonates with this current life, or something along those lines.
That makes sense to me because when I lived in Australia for 11 years, and
Yeah.
before I lived there, that's how I felt about it. But I also get that pull whenever I travel to certain places, if I'm picking the location. So I see why you're asking that. If I'm picking the location, it is like definitely this, usually a feeling around like, I don't know, it's like a pull to go there. Anytime I move to a new city, that's the same thing, that feeling.
Yeah.
So I know what you're saying. It's like there's these places that you're like, I'm supposed to go there for something.
Yeah. And you can like rationalize yourself out of anything, right? And I like, sometimes I do this in readings. I'm like, if I'm starting to rationalize why the information either does or doesn't make sense, it doesn't matter, then I'm using a part of my brain that's not meant for connection. Like that's not the part of the brain that guides are connecting in with. So there's a little bit of how can I accept that this is something I want without putting any rationale behind it, as long as it's like safe and fun and all those things.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's like that, and accepting that there's no reason for it, but it's just giving us a hint of the actions to take to move towards it.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like your intuition doesn't maybe doesn't make sense in the moment, and it doesn't need to. You can follow it still and trust
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. How did you make the decision to move here to Charleston?
That's interesting. I was living in Denver at the time, and it was during COVID, so everything was shut down. They were like full lockdown, and we were in our third lockdown, I think it was, where I was living alone too. So, and I came back to South Carolina because my mom was sick, and nobody was in lockdown, like nothing even remotely similar to lockdown. And my mom I knew she was going to need some support over the next year or so. And so I looked at a friend of mine when I was walking on the beach in Charleston because she was at MUSC. And I was like, I never thought in a million years I would say this, but I think I'm going to move back home. Like it came to me in that moment. And she, like, I don't even think believed it because I never thought, not that I don't love where I'm from. It was just, I've always thought, like, out west and being in, like, I don't know, in the mountains was kind of my place. But now that I'm here, I'm like, oh, it all kind of makes sense to me now.
Yeah. I'm from Atlanta and I had that same thought too. And I went to college at the University of Colorado in Boulder. Um, and I had that same thought, like, I'll never move back home. And I have a little bit of a theory around this. I think sometimes we're blocked from the things that could be in our future with
Hmm.
these extreme wants. And that could be like, I want to or I don't want to. There's an equality there. So because I didn't ever want to move back home, I went to school relatively far away. And then I did at some point move back home, and didn't really want to be there, but had to be there. Uh, and it was a little bit like, all right, like now I'm back home, but I was meant to not see that at the time. Like my
Yeah.
soul was kind of blocking that from me by giving me this like other extreme want. And then I did, I moved from Atlanta and now I'm in Charleston as well. Uh, I never ever considered Charleston a place to live.
What
Like
made
it
you move
was not
here?
on my radar at all. And we definitely moved here because my partner's from here, or not from here, but he was living here. We both talked and he was like, I'll either move to Atlanta or you can move to Charleston. And I like immediately, it was like, I'll move to Charleston. Like the only thing I've always wanted growing up was to live by the beach. My
Yeah.
family was very much like cold weather vacation. I mean, we just took like one vacation a year, but it was always somewhere cold. And I was always begging to go to the beach instead. And I think one year we like went to a beach instead and I had the best time ever. Um, but I always wanted to live by the beach. But for some reason, I'd never visited Charleston as a kid, even though it's relatively close to Atlanta. And the thought of living by the beach was like it for me. I was like, oh, like
Yeah.
but I wasn't meant to like even know about Charleston or like think about it in that way because I think I was meant to go out west and then come back. I don't know. It's like this whole thing. And like when we pay more attention to our wants, we kind of end up getting where we need to be at some point.
Yeah, I fully resonate with that. And I also my two like options usually if I'm gonna move somewhere, at least at this point in my life, have been it needs to either be near the water, like the
Yeah.
beach, or near like the mountains somewhere I can hike with greenery. So this meets that criteria. And it's funny when I moved back to the US after living in Australia, um, I initially moved to Sumter for about 3 months, my hometown in South Carolina, and um, so many people, even like I was consulting, I started my own business and I was consulting for a startup, and even it was a couple of my friends that were like doing this startup, and even they were like, "Are you sure?" Instead of, I was already like, "I'm moving to Denver. That's where I'm going. That's what's happening." And they're like, "Maybe you should go like closer to home first, like Charleston, and then Denver, because it's such a big move. Like I was getting furniture, my car, all of that was going to be in this new location, and I was putting a lot of eggs in one basket. But I was like, no, Denver's it. And then once COVID happened, everything shut down. 3 months later, I was like, okay, I think
Yeah.
maybe I should have done that. So that's probably another reason. It was like COVID, my mom was sick, and I was just like, I need to be able to breathe, and I couldn't breathe in lockdown like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Like just another, like, we'll make sure that you get to the right place.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Um,
Well, I'll
oh,
let you go.
no, you go ahead.
Well, you mentioned you're saying how sometimes during the readings things can come up that you then are meant to process. Like it means something maybe to
Mhm.
whoever's channeling it through, and it might not make sense to you. And there are definitely a couple of those things. I don't know if you want me to.
Yeah, I was about to ask, I was like, is there anything else from the reading? I would love to hear. And you're exactly right. People have heard me say this, I'm sure, on the podcast. Um, and it just happens all the time in readings. And I'm just going to say this one part real quick. As a psychic medium, you have to be brave enough to say the thing, even if you know that what you're going to get back is an I don't know. Like it doesn't make sense right now. And I can feel that now better than I did probably a year ago. And I'll kind of preface it with like, I'm about to say something and it's not going to make sense right now, but here it is. Just write it down and it will hopefully resonate later in a more meaningful way. But I would love to hear those moments from your reading.
Yeah, well, I think what I realized was how little I know about some of my previous family members, because you picked up on like so many truths that I honestly didn't know about until I went back and talked to my family. So one of the things, and these things kind of gave me clarity once I was able to like pull it apart a little bit more. You mentioned there's a woman on my mom's side um, who was into hot air ballooning and that sort of thing in Arizona and Texas. Like you named the states, and I called my mom afterwards, and I have a great aunt. So it was actually my mom's dad's sister, or anyways, mom's dad's
Somewhere in there.
aunt or that did hot air balloons like back in like the
Wild.
early, I don't know if it was early 90s, like it was a long time ago. And in Arizona and in Texas, and like those are the places that she named before I even asked. I just said, I think like Arizona might be a place where there's going to be a model of something I'm going to be doing. That's where we kind of got to with it, you and I. And then she was like, "Oh, that's interesting. Your great aunt did hot air ballooning. Did it?" It was just so random. I was like, "What? This is bizarre." So, to me, I think like when I was thinking about that, I asked my granddad about it, and it's actually kind of funny because he was like, "Well, she was really smart." But she also married, the one thing he could recollect, or like one of the big things I think that stuck with him was that she married a con artist. And he was like, "I don't know if she's trying to send you a message or me, like him, a message on watch out for some similar activity." But I thought that that was funny. I do think with the hot air ballooning, though, you mentioned taking like a higher perspective, potentially that having something to do with it. And that like directly aligns and kind of validates where I'm wanting to go with what I'm wanting to create, and that I have always done best whenever I work at like the organizational level, but I do like to still interact with like on one-on-one or in group settings with like clients or people that I'm supporting. So it gave me that perspective of being like, it's okay that what I am doing a master's to combine with my like psychology PhD to do this next thing, and it's going to give me these skills to run groups, but I want to have a clinic where it's like a holistic therapy clinic with psychedelic therapy and all other types of like modalities. And I think that perspective piece was what resonated with me there.
That is so cool. I
Yeah.
like cannot recall mentioning hot air ballooning, though I of course don't remember it. I'm like, ooh, like that's very unique and cool. The minute you mention this happens, and you might even notice it too. Like the minute you mention her, she kind of steps forward. She touches the back of my neck real quick, and it's a little bit of she's like, hey, can you just tell Lauren also that I'm guide to her? Like
Okay.
I'll help kind of like guide her through. To me, it feels a little bit more like education, career sort of
Okay.
sector of life. But
That's
also
good.
like everything that you just said, because that comes straight from your soul and your intuition of like, what could this information be about? And then your intuition gets to take over, is perfect. I will say, I think it's hilarious that the thing that stuck out to your grandfather was that she married a con artist, but it's not. It is not to watch out for
Okay.
anyone. Like,
That's great because I was
yeah.
like, oh God, I don't know. I hadn't thought about that. Like
Yeah.
if those were messages I could come to.
Yeah,
Good to know.
we'll like do that naturally. You're gonna understand this because you're in this field, but like we do that naturally, right? Like sometimes we go to like worst case scenario or like the most negative thought.
Yeah.
There's something that I think is really interesting that happens. I was about to say in mediumship, but it really truly is for like everyone. Um, where we have this thought, it's like a good thought, and then a bad thought. And then, like, if we listen again, we'll kind of get back to the good thought or an even better thought. But sometimes the bad thought gets so loud that then we like cut off the action. We're like, okay, just never mind.
Mm.
A lot of people with like imposter syndrome will understand this. It's like we have this thought of like, okay, I'm going to go for it. Like, I'm good enough. I can do it. And then we have this thought of, oh, but who am I? That's going to be embarrassing. What are people going to think of me? And sometimes we get stuck there, but then we have like another choice to be like, wait, if I were to take that thought away again, what's the thought that can come after that? And it's usually something positive again, or even like a well, fuck that. Like, go for
Right.
it. Like, you
Yeah.
had the first, we can make those like more positive first thoughts louder. It just takes a lot of work, like a lot.
Um,
I didn't get this far in my mediumship without having to do that again and again and again and still doing it today. But I don't know how that got to your grandfather's funny little thought of like, watch out for the con artists. But I'm just saying, like, that's so normal and natural. And it's like, we can say that,
yeah.
we can have those thoughts. But then what's like the real message that she's trying to send? She touches the back of my neck again. She's like, the real message is just that I'm guide for you. And like, I have this really cool sign and symbol to show you that I'm there.
Thank God. Okay.
Yeah.
It's funny because I like played it for him, that section for him, for
Oh,
my
yeah.
granddad. And then when that was the first thing that came up, I was like, oh God. Like I literally, I was like, I'm gonna have to take a minute with this.
I need
And
to-
then it was good that I listened back now, like for this, because I was like, oh no, I think actually this higher perspective thing. And then,
Yeah.
so you're right. It's like you can then like kind of work it out once you can let those things go.
Yeah. I have a feeling that if a con artist came into your life, you would notice it right away. Like
Yeah.
you are very good at like seeing people's characteristics. The other thing is like the funny thing that happens in readings is yes, occasionally I'll get something where it's like, hey, let's like look at this health thing or let's look at this relationship or let's look at X, Y, and Z. And like, it's more important, like how you feel about it once you're already in it. But as far as like watching out for future things that are going to like be incredibly detrimental and guides coming in and being like, but don't do this or else, it rarely happens in readings. And I don't think it's ever happened in a reading of mine unless someone has interpreted it that way. Because our guides and loved ones and our own soul won't even take away learning moments from us, because sometimes it's like in those pivots and those falls that we actually get the most out of it so that we can like move on to where we really need to be. Like, and it
Yeah.
ends up, and I think everybody listening could probably look back on a moment where it's like, gosh, like I didn't want so and so to break up with me and I was so devastated in the moment, or I really wanted that job, or I didn't want to get fired and I was so devastated in the moment. But gosh, thank goodness it didn't work out
Yeah.
because here
Yeah.
I am
Goodness.
now, right?
Yes, I've gone through a lot of that this last like I feel like 18 months has been a period of that. So
Yeah. But like our guides are there to help you. Your guides are there to help you move through that. And to like pick up on the lessons sometimes I hesitate saying lessons because I don't like this idea that the universe is trying to like teach us a lesson. I don't know. It sounds so, I don't know the word for it. It sounds like not fair almost. So it's not like it's not like the universe is trying to teach us a lesson. It's that the world provides lessons for us to catch on to and we just get to grow from there.
yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
And that makes sense to me. It's like you find the message within what's being said, and then
Yeah.
it's like your opportunity to take it and like either learn a lesson or do what you will with it.
Yeah. Or even like give yourself grace. Like, all right, like I wasn't meant to be perfect at that, or I wasn't meant to like get in or out of that in the most perfect way, but just more authentically to me. And then how can I kind of shuffle into the next thing from here?
Yeah, yeah, I like that. Yeah.
Is there anything else from the reading or anything else that you want to like add on, say, whatever?
Well, I mean, I would say one of the big things that came out, I was surprised how much I asked in that reading about how my dad was doing. I now when I look back, I was like, oh, okay, there are things going on that I was really worried about. That meant that you channeled his my grandparents on my dad's side, and that's probably been the most like uh, profound kind of realizations I've had from that once I was able to sit with it. And I do think that like on a personal level, it helped me process like parts of my past basically that I hadn't fully addressed.
Yeah.
And my nana, so my dad's mom, talked about a couple of times when I had like jumped off of a ledge and completely had to like start over. And she said that she would have like been there for me if she could have been. And like for the first time that this happened, when this is when like she was still alive. So whenever you're channeling it, she's saying those things. And her advice was just to like keep going and to trust that I won't have to face that ledge anymore. I won't have to like jump off of the ledge and start over again and go through that painful stuff. Like I'll have the normal ups and downs of life, but it's never going to be these big moments like that was. And I realized when she was talking about this time when I had to jump off of the ledge and she would have been there when she was alive, she was talking about when I lived with my mom's ex-husband. So that was my ex-stepdad and like basically my father figure from when I was 10 to when I was 17. And he was really abusive. And during that time, I had to fight constantly for myself and for my space and just like respect of my body. Mm-hmm. And I mean, that's kind of how I lived my life for that whole like period of time from my adolescence through my teens until I moved out when I was 17. And during that time, it's funny she said you just have to keep going, because that's what I told myself. Like, you just have to get through this, and you have to get to the end of high school, you can leave, and you don't have to look back, basically. And that is what got me through. And her advice in the reading was, like, that's what you're using. I was, like, kind of just have gone through that last, like, ledge, I guess, or, like, I, like, have wrapped up, I feel like that. And that's what's gotten me through that piece, too. So, like, these kind of 5 years, I feel like, of leaving Australia and building a business and healing like PTSD from that childhood trauma was like that second jumping off the ledge moment. And I just think that it's led to something incredible that I didn't realize at the time. So I don't know. I think that it brought out these things and gave me a reframe of her role in that. And she was saying, like, she tried to be there for me but couldn't. And it's funny because she tried to get custody of me, and I didn't understand why at that time, because we weren't close. Like, my dad couldn't have custody for certain reasons, but like, she was trying so hard to get custody of me, and I think I was just so always in fight or flight, like running away, doing the, my coping mechanisms were not healthy at the time. So I think I was just in this like heightened state that I couldn't see it. But it's nice to know she said she was there for me through this last ledge too. And I don't know, it just kind of made things, it's connected the dots for me and really made sense.
Yeah, I really love that. And first of all, congratulations and thank you for being like strong enough to get through a childhood like that. I can relate to that. I think I talk about it a little bit in Henry's episode if people want to go back. But something that really jumped out from what you said is I would hear this voice in my head and talk about that like small voice, big voice thing that was just keep going, like just keep going. And I had a knowing that once I left home, I'd be okay, and that things would get better and better and better. I do wonder if there's like kind of a guide out there that helps guide children through situations like that. And I just think it's interesting that we both kind of heard or acknowledged like that exact same thing. I think that's really beautiful. And there is something, and I say this to in readings all the time, like the message is always to just keep going, right? Like, and we can take that and put it to the side and give up on it, or we can take it and know that there's some truth to it, that there's like this feeling, even if it's just an ounce of a feeling, that things are going to get better if we just keep going, that sometimes we are in like the midst of a cycle that we can't always get out of or have control over, but that if we just keep going, we will find ourselves in a better place. So thank you for doing that for all of us so that we are now here with you.
Yeah, I like that. I think that whole looking forward and knowing, like, now that you're saying that on the other side, things are going to get better would be what I had then and maybe was lacking this time. That's helped me. Like, hearing that has helped me, like, move to the other side of this, like, ledge, I guess. So that's really interesting that you say that, is like knowing that and trusting, not giving up kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like another one of those things that we can't put any rationale to it. But it just has like a knowingness. In psychic mediumship, we might even call that Nissens. Hopefully I'm saying that right. I should probably know.
Sounds right to me.
I know. It sounds great. It's perfect. But it is when in a reading, but it can also, readings can be with just yourself, just connecting in with yourself. It is when you just know. Like you just have a knowing. There's no words, there's no visual that comes with it. Maybe slightly afterwards, but it's just a knowing. And so there's like this knowing of just keep going. I think occasionally growing up, I would hear that somewhat audibly inside my head. But it is, I think that's one of the most important things for people to know, is that there's like a purpose and a reason that we're here. We're not always meant to know it. And sometimes we know it, we get to it, and then like our purpose expands and changes and evolves from there. So then we kind of lose it again, and we just have to keep going.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
I think that ties into what you're saying too about like being okay with wanting what you want, because I think that helps you get to the other side, is being able to be like, it's okay to like have that dream and you can get there again, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And sometimes those wants are like funny ones, right? Like some people get kind of hard on themselves for like wanting like a nicer place to live. I'm going to use that as an example. And maybe they even get like, no, I should be fine with what I have. I think you should be grateful for what you have, because that helps you get the thing that you want. Like it's always okay to like want whatever it is that you want. You don't always have to put reason behind it. But yeah, and if we just keep going, sometimes we get to like see that on the other side of things, on the other side of like that power of, all right, I'm going to move forward, even though today's not the best of days, or even though I don't even know why I'm moving forward, but I'm going to, because I just have a knowing that there's something on the other side of it.
Yeah, I like that.
Do you have anything else from the reading that you wanted to talk about?
I think the last thing, and it's really probably related to that point that you had mentioned, was like being okay. It's okay to want what you want, and then to say it out loud. Like that, saying it can sometimes even help you work out if that's something that you want to do, and if it is something you want to do, it can make it come quicker if you say it out loud, like speaking and like saying what the ideas are that I have or whatever it might be. And it's funny because listening to that, like that has definitely been a sticking point for me, especially since I feel like since I moved back to South Carolina, related to that story about my childhood. When I was 19, I signed, it was my choice, so I signed a gag order. And so through that, I think it's felt like I've had like a restricted voice in a way, because there's certain things that I can and can't speak about. And I think realizing, one, it's okay to want what I want, but learning, and like this past, I feel like year, I've really been working on speaking more, like using my voice more.
Yeah.
Which seems weird, but like even though I signed that at 19, I moved when I was 20, like to Australia, and I lived there for, I was there until my like early 30s, and then back in Denver, or like, I was in Denver for a while and then back here. So it's really been in the last 3 years where that's been difficult. And I've known it in the back of my mind, but hearing you say like it's like okay to speak it out loud too, it's actually a good thing. The more you do that, the more you'll get to solving the problem quicker. That has been really profound. So I appreciate that message.
Oh, I really love that. I get like kind of chills when you start talking about that. Like it's a little bit of like your soul connecting with my soul, being like, it feels good, it feels good, it feels good. I think that's really, really powerful. I also, I love speaking your wants out loud. There's even some that are like running through my head right now. I'm like, oh, like gosh. And then when you say it out loud, you get like a little uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But then you're like, okay, so what does that feel like when I keep that inside though? Like probably even more uncomfortable. So then if I start saying it out loud, if I start getting more comfortable with it, if I start taking actions towards it, then it'll more easily come. Like, and like what, just like or it'll easily be let go. It'll easily like be released, like whatever it is, whichever direction people need to take with it. And how freeing that can be.
Yeah.
I love that.
And I feel like when you say it out loud, if you're saying it to someone, they can sometimes have information you didn't even know you needed to figure out this thing. Like if it's your next step or not, if it's a yes or no. which I honestly think that's how those 7 things came to
Yeah.
like fruition. They were on the list of wants, most of them in some way. I mean, I never imagined that I would find this place that I'm living in. I didn't think that was even possible. But yeah, it's like just saying it out loud and taking some action around it um, seemed to be a big part of that. So
Yeah, that's
yeah,
cool. And action could even look like just getting more comfortable with it, right? Like comfortable
yeah,
speaking, comfortable like using your voice and saying what you want. Like I'm not trying to be sexist here, but sometimes women have a really hard time saying what it is that they want. And even if we just start to like practice that just within ourselves, within our own like safe space, I think it's a great way to, that's getting started. That's action enough to start drawing those things towards you.
yeah.
Yeah.
I like
Okay,
that.
I've got one last question for you.
Yeah.
Have you noticed since our reading, have you noticed anything more like spiritual, like either seen signs or symbols from your loved ones or felt their presence more?
That's a
That's
good
okay if it's a no.
question. I think so. I mean, I like generally I try to meditate and like tap into my higher self, and I think through that, like I don't know which guides would be coming in, but I'll like journal afterwards, and I would say that it has to be what's happening when I'm like journaling about
Yeah.
things. You know what I mean? That they must be coming through, and on that level, I don't know if that's answering the question. Was that the right? I mean, what
Yeah.
question? Is that the question I'm answering?
That is the perfect answer, and I really really like it because you're like literally doing something to call them in and like feel them
Yeah.
around you. I think that that's perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Thank you for sharing.
Yes. Thank you. Thanks for having me on. This is such a
Yeah.
cool experience.
Will you tell everyone how to follow you and anything else that you just want them to know?
Yeah. So you can follow me on Instagram. It's Dr. Lauren Hodge, and my website is drlaurenhodge.com. And yeah, you can contact me on there, or you can shoot me an email at it's Lauren at drlaurenhodge.com. So
Okay, I'm gonna ask you a question. If someone were to come to book with you,
mhm.
like what do you offer? Like what services do you offer? So if someone is looking for someone like you, what can you offer them? And how can
So
they book?
yeah, so you can book on my website. There is a link where you sign out a quick form. You fill out a quick form, and then you book in for a free consultation with me. We kind of talk about if there's a good fit. And what I do with the workplace well-being side of things is, and really both parenting and workplace well-being, I'll work with a business leader or a parent to help them really get clear on their goals and the emotion regulation side of managing a family or a business, and also like most importantly getting those habits in place so that they can look after themselves, so that they can look after their people, either
Yeah.
their team or their children. So those are the things with parents. I go really into the emotional and behavioral things. So if you're having some concerns with your kids, like tantruming, or you're noticing like a lot of anxiety about certain things, we can work through that. So like I'll develop a parenting plan and give like actionable strategies, um, where they kind of work and have some homework whenever they go home and work with their family and their kids, and then they come back and
Yeah.
we tweak things. So that's what you can do, and you can sign up on my website to do those things.
Oh, I love it. Okay, perfect. Then I'm just gonna say one last thing. I'm gonna be brave enough to say it because I'm like, oh gosh, like this seems so generic, and maybe I shouldn't say it. And that's the big thought. But my first thought is, I noticed that I said book with like a really strong K, which is a little bit unlike me because as a true Southerner, I can kind of leave off some syllables there. And then it just started going over and over and over in my head. So I just know that I meant to mention like the book or writing the book to you, like from your guides and from your loved ones.
Nice. I've definitely thought about that a lot. So that's interesting. All right.
Yeah,
I'll take that on
perfect.
board.
Well, thank you, Lauren. I really appreciate it. And everybody, reach out to Dr. Lauren Hodge if you need her. Thank you so much for the update. Thank you, thank you, thank you.